In the soft quiet of a fading evening, the old city of Frankfurt breathed gently, as if whispering stories the world had forgotten. Narrow cobblestone streets curled through the Jewish quarter, known as the Judengasse, a place where homes stood close together, leaning slightly as if sharing secrets from centuries past. Wooden shutters creaked softly in the cold wind, and the golden glow of lanterns spilled warm circles of light onto the stone paths below. It is here, in this calm and humble setting, that the long and winding story of the Rothschild family quietly begins. There were no grand houses in this street, no marble floors, no towering gates, no signs of wealth. Instead, there were simple homes, built with timber and brickage, one marked not by a number, but by a symbol. In those days, houses carried names, not addresses. A baker might live under the sign of a wheat sheaf, a tailor under a pair of scissors, and one ordinary, unremarkable home carried a sign that would unknowingly give rise to one of the most influential names in financial history, a bright red shield. It hung just above the doorway, small and faded, but unmistakable, the emblem that would one day be echoed in noble coats of arms, royal documents, and financial history books around the world. But here, in the 16th century Judengasse, it was simply a house marker, a sign for neighbors and visitors. Nothing more, nothing less. And yet, history often begins in places where no one expects it to. Inside this quiet home lived Isaac Elchanan Rothschild, a man of modest means and simple ambitions. He did not build empires or influence kings. He earned his living in the ordinary rhythm of daily trade. Surrounded by smells of warm bread from nearby shops and the distant chatter of families preparing their evening meals, there was no hint that centuries later people would speak his family name with fascination, suspicion, admiration, or awe. For him, the red shield was just a sinner, way for people to find his door in the maze-like streets of Frankfurt. But names have a strange power. They travel through time, shaped by the people who carry them. They gather weight and meaning with each generation, and sometimes, without any intention, they become symbols of something far greater than the walls they first belonged to. As the lanterns flickered against the wooden beams of the house, the Judengasse settled into its nightly silence. Children finished their games, merchants closed their shops, and the last echoes of footsteps faded into the distance. Life was slow here, predictable, uncomplicated. It was the kind of place where stories unfolded, not through dramatic events, but through small, steady changes, the kind you might only notice if you paused long enough to listen. And tonight, in this calm atmosphere, the world unknowingly held its breath, because within these dim, peaceful streets, the roots of an extraordinary legacy were quietly taking shape, one that would branch out across Europe, influencing wars, economies, and the shaping of modern finance. But for now, the red shield hung silently over the door, swinging gently in the evening wind, and history slept. The night deepened over Frankfurt, but the narrow street of Judengasse remained calm, touched only by the soft glow of lantern flames swaying with each gentle breath of the wind. In this quiet neighborhood, where life moved slowly and predictably, the house with the red shield stood as it always had, simple, humble, unnoticed by the wider world. The red shield itself was nothing grand. It was a small wooden sign, painted in a shade that time had faded, hanging just above the doorway. Travelers passing through the street might pause for only a moment to glance at it, perhaps wondering why a shield and why red, but the people who lived here knew that this was just the way of Judangasa. Every home carried a symbol. Every family had a mark. It was a tradition born from necessity, for house numbers did not yet exist, but this particular symbol, this Rothschild, would one day become far more famous than any who walked these streets could imagine. Yet tonight, it was simply a sign on a modest home. Inside lived families who shared their days with quiet routines. Mothers cooking simple meals, fathers returning from work, their clothes carrying the scent of the markets, children whispering stories under dimly lit candles, drifting slowly toward sleep. Life here wasn't filled with wealth, but with rhythm predictable, steady, almost soothing. The red shield had been chosen long before the Rothschild name existed in any historical record. It was just a way to identify the house in a row of many. But names, like stories, have a way of growing. Families adopt them, children carry them forward, and generations later, the world remembers the meaning long after the symbol has disappeared. For now, though, the shield belonged to no legacy. It simply marked the home of a family living their quiet life in a quiet street. The wooden walls of the house creaked softly in the cold night. The candlelight inside flickered through the small windows, creating a warm glow against the street's darkness. These homes were not built for grandeur. They were built for survival. The Judangasa was crowded, its homes pressed close, like friends huddled together for warmth. The ceilings were low, the floors uneven, and the rooms small, yet filled with the lived-in warmth of people who found comfort in community. Families in this quarter had learned to live with limitations, restrictions, and boundaries placed by the city's laws. But inside their homes, they built something much stronger than walls. They built resilience. They built stories. They built names that would outlast every hardship among these homes. The House of the Red Shield stood quietly, never attempting to announce its future role in history. No one who walked past it could imagine that centuries later, this simple symbol would become the title of a dynasty tied to finance, diplomacy, and political influence across Europe. But every grand story begins somewhere humble. Every legacy has an unnoticed beginning, and sometimes a future too vast to imagine takes root in places where no one looks twice. Tonight, the red shield swung lightly in the wind, tapping gently against the wooden beam. A soft, rhythmic sound, almost like a heartbeat, almost like a hint that something, someday, would awaken from this quiet corner of Frankfurt. But not yet. For now, the night remained peaceful, and the house remained simply a house. And the story waited. In the dim hush of early morning, as a pale gray light settled over the rooftops of Frankfurt's Judangasa, the house marked by the red shield stirred with the soft, familiar sounds of another ordinary day, a day like countless others before it, yet one that carried within it the quiet heartbeat of a legacy still waiting to unfold. Inside the small wooden rooms of the house, routines began with gentle motions, someone stoking a fire, someone folding blankets, someone whispering a prayer. Near the window, where cold air seeped through the wooden frame, and in these small, unremarkable gestures lived the simplicity of a life grounded in faith. work, and modest hopes, the kind of life that rarely draws attention, but steadily builds the character of generations. It was here, in this unadorned home, that the early roots of the Rothschild story continued to take shape, not through grand events or dramatic turns, but through the quiet discipline and unbroken rhythm of daily living. For the family who occupied this home understood the value of small steps, steady habits, and unwavering patience. And though the world outside often placed limits on Jewish families living within the Judaism, they found ways to cultivate strength in the face of boundaries, creating a sense of unity that held them together through every uncertainty. Merchants in nearby streets prepared their stalls. The smell of fresh bread drifted through the narrow alleyways. Distant footsteps echoed over cobblestones, and from somewhere in the neighborhood came the soft melody of a child learning morning prayers, each sound weaving into a tapestry of ordinary life that held a quiet beauty of its own. And within these modest walls, unknown to anyone walking past, a spirit of careful planning, curiosity, and resilience was quietly growing, the very qualities that centuries later would define a family that touched the world of finance, diplomacy, and influence. The red shield above the door remained unchanged, a silent witness to the passing days and years, as if guarding a secret too profound for the casual observer. And in its steady, unassuming presence lay a reminder that history often begins not with explosions or announcements, but in the gentle accumulation of small acts, disciplined learning, and the steadfast nurturing of values that, while invisible in the moment, will one day shape destinies far beyond the quiet streets of Judangasa. The children of the house ran barefoot over worn floorboards, their laughter bouncing softly off the walls, while their parents measured coins, recorded trades, and whispered plans that only they could understand. For even in this tiny home, lessons about responsibility, trust, and the careful handling of money were quietly being instilled, building the invisible scaffolding of knowledge and foresight that would one day span across Europe. Sunlight slowly filtered through the small windows, painting the interior with golden streaks, highlighting the simple wooden furniture, stacks of books, and small trinkets that reflected both thrift and taste. And outside, the alley slowly awakened as neighbors exchanged greetings, the scent of baked bread and fresh herbs filling the air. And through all of it, the red shield hung still and silent, a timeless marker of a family learning patience, discipline, and foresight, a family whose influence, unknown at this hour, would ripple across generations, reaching courts, banks, and cities far beyond the cobbled streets of Frankfurt. And yet, all of this history began quietly, peacefully, gently, in a small house marked by a red shield, where ordinary routines laid the foundations of extraordinary legacy, reminding us that greatness often grows unseen, nurtured in the calm persistence of everyday life. In the warm glow of late morning, the small house with the red shield hummed quietly with life, as the family moved through their familiar routines with a calm rhythm that seemed to echo the pulse of the Judangasa itself. The children ran barefoot across the wooden floors, giggling softly, their small hands brushing against stacks of coins and ledgers that had been carefully laid out by their father, while the aroma of fresh bread and simmering herbs drifted through the air, mingling with the faint scent of parchment and ink, creating an atmosphere that was at once ordinary and subtly filled with potential. for in this household, lessons were quietly unfolding that would shape the destiny of generations, teaching patience, discipline, and the careful handling of both resources and relationships. Among the children, a young Mayer Amschel Rothschild moved with a quiet curiosity, his small fingers tracing the outlines of coins that had been passed down through the family, his eyes lingering on the faint engravings and careful markings, imagining the stories they might carry. And in these moments, he absorbed not only the value of the coins themselves, but also the principles that governed the exchange of wealth and trust, the invisible rules that would guide him in years to come. His mother watched him with a gentle smile, recognizing a spark of intelligence and determination that seemed larger than the confines of their modest home. While his father moved methodically from one task to another, counting, recording, and correcting with quiet precision, instilling in Mayer the understanding that careful observation, attention to detail, and consistency were the cornerstones of success. Lessons delivered not with harsh words, but through lived example and daily repetition. Outside the house, the narrow alleyways were alive with merchants preparing their stalls, neighbors exchanging soft greetings, and the soft creak of wooden wheels over cobblestones, marking the passage of time in a neighborhood where life was measured not by grandeur, but by the slow accumulation of knowledge, habits, and connections that, while invisible to outsiders, formed the invisible web of opportunity for those attentive enough to notice. Mayer, in his small and contemplative way, began to understand the importance of communication, trust, and reputation, seeing that every gesture, every careful recording of coins, every thoughtful conversation could shape not only immediate outcomes, but future possibilities far beyond the walls of the house. As the morning progressed, the light shifted, illuminating the red shield above the door, its color muted by time, yet still vibrant enough to mark the presence of a family quietly learning the art of resilience, planning, and foresight, while the quiet rhythm of the Judangasa continued around them, a constant reminder that even the smallest and most seemingly ordinary surroundings could nurture extraordinary potential. In the soft exchanges of daily life, Mayer learned the power of observation and memory, the subtle ways people trusted and doubted, gave, and the invisible threads that connected individuals to one another in a society bound by rules, expectations, and opportunity. Lessons that he would carry into adulthood and use to build connections across cities and nations. And while no one walking past the house that day could imagine the influence that would one day emanate from this quiet corner of Frankfurt, every careful action, every attentive thought, every small lesson learned in the peaceful hum of daily life was quietly laying the foundation for a legacy that would stretch across Europe and endure for centuries. The red shield swung lightly in the morning breeze, as if nodding to the passage of time and the growth of a young mind, a witness, deliberate cultivation of wisdom, patience, and foresight that would one day define the Rothschild name. And in that small, sunlit room, history moved forward gently, imperceptibly, shaping a future in which the ordinary routines of one modest home would ripple outward to touch the world. As the day stretched lazily into afternoon, the quiet streets of Frankfurt's Judangasa remained filled with a soft rhythm of ordinary life, the gentle hum of footsteps on cobblestones, the muted chatter of neighbors, and the distant clatter of carts delivering fresh goods, all blending seamlessly with the subtle sense of baking bread and simmering stew that wafted from the small wooden houses, including the modest home marked by the red shield where young Mayer Amschel Rothschild moved with a quiet determination that belied his years. Inside, the family continued their familiar routines, counting coins, folding ledgers, whispering advice and reminders in gentle tones, each action imbued with careful intention and discipline. For even in the simplicity of their there was a profound understanding that the foundation of wealth and influence began with meticulous attention to detail, patient observation, and unwavering consistency. And Mayer, with keen eyes and a curious mind, absorbed these lessons in silence, learning the subtle interplay between trust, commerce, and human behavior that would later form the core of his approach to business. The red shield above the door, weathered by decades of wind and rain, yet still holding its vibrant color, stood as a silent witness to these formative days, a symbol of stability and continuity in a neighborhood where lives often unfolded slowly and quietly, unnoticed by the wider world, yet carrying within them seeds of extraordinary possibility. Mayer watched his father meticulously arranging coins and documents, noting the precision, the care, and the thought behind every gesture, realizing, perhaps without fully understanding, that wealth was not merely accumulated through luck or opportunity, but through discipline, foresight, and the cultivation of relationships built on trust and reliability. And in these early lessons, he began to grasp the subtle mechanisms of commerce, the importance of reputation, and the value of strategic thinking, all nurtured in an environment that blended ordinary domestic life with an unspoken sense of purpose. Outside, the Judenggasse continued its steady cadence of daily activity, merchants calling softly to customers, children running and laughing in the alleyways, neighbors exchanging greetings and newsall, of which provided a living, breathing backdrop for Mayer's observations, a microcosm of the larger world he would one day navigate with skill and influence. In the quiet of the house, every coin counted, every ledger entry, every whispered word carried lessons that would later echo across the cities of Europe, forming an invisible scaffolding of knowledge, discipline, and foresight. And though the day seemed ordinary, it was in these seemingly mundane moments that the foundation of the Rothschild legacy was being laid. For the qualities, Mayer absorbed the patience to wait, the skill to observe, the wisdom to calculate, and the courage to dream beyond the confines of his street would eventually shape an empire that spanned continents, influencing finance, politics, and society in ways unimaginable at the time. And as the afternoon light softened and fell upon the red shield, casting long, gentle shadows across the worn wooden walls, one could almost imagine the silent promise held within that small house that ordinary actions, repeated with care, could grow into extraordinary achievements, and that a quiet boy watching, learning, and absorbing the rhythm of life around him would, in the decades to come, carry forward a name that would become synonymous with wealth, strategy, and enduring influence, a legacy that began humbly, peacefully, and patiently in the quiet streets of Frankfurt, beneath the watchful, unassuming gaze of a simple red shield. In the quiet, early morning of Frankfurt, The soft sunlight filtered through narrow alleyways of the Judengasse, touching the worn cobblestones with a pale, golden hue. As young Mayer Amschel Rothschild stirred quietly in his modest room, his eyes flickering over the few coins and small ledgers spread before him. A boy whose curiosity was already sharper than most, who watched the rhythm of the streets outside with a stillness that seemed unusual for his age, noting how merchants arranged their stalls, how neighbors exchanged greetings, how the subtle gestures of each person conveyed trust, caution, or familiarity. And in this careful observation, he began to understand that the world was a network of relationships, invisible yet powerful, delicate yet resilient, and that every action, however small, could influence outcomes far beyond immediate sight. Inside the house, his family moved in calm routine, each gesture deliberate, the mother arranging herbs and food, the father counting coins with precise care, whispering instructions to Mayer as if guiding him through a silent curriculum of observation and reasoning, teaching not with harsh words, but through example, through patience, and through the gentle insistence on attentiveness. For in these early lessons, Mayer absorbed more than mere numbers. He absorbed an understanding of human nature, of fairness and caution, of the ways trust and reputation could travel like currency itself, and how small, thoughtful actions today could ripple outward into unforeseen opportunities tomorrow. The red shield above the door, faded yet enduring, marked not only a home but a quiet sanctuary of learning, a place where ordinary routines carried extraordinary potential. And while the streets of Frankfurt were alive with the muted sounds of everyday life, the soft calls of vendors, the shuffle of feet, the distant clanging of a blacksmith's hammer inside Mayer's mind, a different world was opening, a world of calculation, foresight, and careful judgment. And though he was still a boy, he already began to sense the weight of decisions, the importance of preparation, and the value of observing people, objects, and circumstances with unwavering attention. As the morning light shifted, illuminating the wooden beams and worn floorboards, Mayer imagined futures far beyond his immediate environment, imagining cities he had never seen, people he had never met, and opportunities that lay hidden in the intricate dance of trade, trust, and information. And all the while, the quiet lessons of home discipline, consistency, patience, and quiet curiosity laid a foundation for a mind that would one day think in terms of networks spanning nations, understanding connections that others overlooked, noticing patterns that others missed, and weaving strategies that would eventually form the bedrock of a financial empire. And as he lifted a small coin to examine its engraving, turning it slowly in his fingers, he felt a sense of fascination, a gentle thrill, an unspoken understanding that each object, each interaction, each moment of careful observation carried significance, and that by paying attention, by learning quietly, by practicing patience, he could accumulate knowledge more valuable than gold itself. And in the peaceful rhythm of that morning, beneath the watchful red shield and the soft hum of the Judengasse, a young boy was unknowingly preparing to carry his family's name beyond the narrow streets of Frankfurt, planting the seeds of foresight, strategy, and enduring influence that would, in time, touch the wider world, all beginning with the quiet cultivation of mind. character, and patience in the safe, ordinary corners of his modest home. As the morning deepened and the pale sunlight stretched across the narrow streets of Frankfurt's Judengasse, young Mayer Amschel Rothschild continued to observe the subtle rhythms of life around him, noticing how each person moved with purpose, how the merchants arranged their goods not just for sale but to inspire trust, how the neighbors' nods and quiet greetings carried messages about reliability and reputation. And in this careful watching, he began to understand that the world was more than coins and ledgers, that commerce was not only a matter of wealth, but of relationships, perception, and patience. Inside the modest wooden house, marked by the faded red shield, his father guided him gently through the meticulous counting of coins, the balancing of small accounts, and the careful recording of each transaction, not simply teaching arithmetic, but the principles of fairness, consistency, and attention to detail, showing Mayer how even the smallest errors or oversights could ripple outward and influence trust, and how a sharp mind and disciplined observation could turn ordinary routines into extraordinary advantage, while his mother quietly encouraged him to notice patterns in behavior, subtle signs in conversation, and the way information traveled from person to person, lessons that were far less tangible than numbers, yet infinitely more powerful, for they prepared him to navigate a world where knowledge, timing, and discretion mattered as much as gold. Outside, the Judengasse was alive with muted activity, the creak of carts over cobblestones, the soft hum of conversation, the calls of merchants beginning their trade, but inside Mayer's mind, a more complex world unfolded, one where every interaction could be a lesson, every gesture a clue, and every careful observation a tool for understanding people, markets, and opportunity. And as he turned over the coins in his small hands, examining the subtle engravings and their delicate imperfections, he began to sense the deeper story that each object carried, that each exchange between humans carried, a story not written in ink, but in trust, timing, and perception. And he learned that the greatest value was not merely the accumulation of wealth, but the understanding of how to influence, negotiate, and preserve it wisely, all while remaining discreet and honorable. The red shield above the door, weathered and enduring, seemed to mark not only a family home, but a place where knowledge and prudence were silently cultivated, where ordinary acts of diligence and attention planted the seeds of foresight and strategy. And though the world outside might have seemed indifferent to the slow unfolding of these lessons, within the small rooms of the house, a young boy absorbed wisdom that would shape the course of his life and the legacy of generations to come. As the afternoon light softened, illuminating the wooden beams and worn floors, Mayer felt the quiet thrill of understanding, a sense of growing insight, as if the ordinary objects and interactions around him were pieces of a puzzle he was beginning to see. And in that subtle awareness, he unknowingly practiced skills that would one day allow him to weave connections across cities, influence powerful figures, and build a network of trust and foresight that extended far beyond the narrow streets of Frankfurt, all nurtured through patient observation, careful thought, and the guidance of parents who understood that true education comes not only from formal instruction, but from the slow, deliberate cultivation of perception, judgment, and character. And as the red shield glimmered faintly in the afternoon sun, a silent witness to these formative hours. The foundations of a mind destined to shape the future were quietly taking root, hidden from the eyes of passers-by, but destined to ripple outward in ways that would echo across generations and nations. As the sun climbed higher over Frankfurt, casting long shadows across the narrow cobblestones of the Judengasse, young Mayer Amschel Rothschild sat quietly at a small wooden table in the modest home marked by the red shield, his fingers tracing the edges of worn coins, while his eyes followed the subtle movements of his parents and the gentle rhythm of life outside. For even in these ordinary surroundings, he sensed a world of patterns and connections, a universe in which careful attention and patience revealed hidden truths, and he absorbed lessons not only from the arithmetic of money, but from the behaviors of people, noting how merchants encouraged trust with polite gestures, how neighbors measured their words and movements with care, and how even the smallest exchanges carried meaning far beyond immediate perception. Inside the home, his father moved methodically, placing coins and ledgers with deliberate precision, demonstrating the quiet discipline required to maintain order and reliability, while his mother whispered guidance, pointing out the importance of noticing subtle details, of listening carefully, and of remembering that every action and word might influence how others perceive and respond to you. Lessons that were invisible to outsiders, but critical to Mayer's understanding of human interaction and the management of both wealth and reputation. Outside, the Judengasse pulsed with a calm but steady energy, the soft creak of cartwheels, muted greetings among neighbors, and the distant calls of vendors starting their tradiette within the walls of the red-shielded house. Mayer's young mind transformed these sounds into a map of social cues, opportunities, and risks, observing who acted honestly, who hesitated, and who carried confidence, slowly building a mental framework of insight and foresight that would guide him in later years. He began to understand the importance of timing, that patience often yielded far greater results than haste, and that quiet observation could teach more than instruction alone, for by watching carefully, he learned to anticipate the behaviors of others and to recognize value not only in coins but in character, trust, and the reliability of human connections. Principles that would later become the foundation of his success across cities and nations. As the afternoon light filtered through the small windows, illuminating the worn wooden floors and the faded red shield above the doorway, Mayer felt the thrill of comprehension, a subtle, almost imperceptible excitement at recognizing how ordinary elements of daily life conversations, gestures, and transactions were interconnected, forming a network of understanding and influence that extended far beyond the walls of the home. These hours, filled with quiet contemplation, meticulous attention, and gentle guidance, nurtured in him the critical qualities of foresight, strategic thinking, and measured judgment, preparing him to navigate a complex world with confidence and discretion. And though at the time it seemed only a normal day in the life of a boy in Frankfurt, each moment quietly contributed to the scaffolding of knowledge and experience that would, decades later, enable Mayer Amschel Rothschild to establish connections, build trust, and lay the groundwork for a financial empire that would span Europe, all beginning in the peaceful, sunlit rooms of a small home where curiosity, patience, and observation were quietly cultivated under the watchful presence of the red shield that had witnessed countless such mornings and would continue to stand as a silent symbol of the family's enduring values. As the afternoon sun began to tilt toward the horizon, casting long, golden beams across the narrow cobblestone streets of Frankfurt's, young Mayer Amschel Rothschild remained seated at the small wooden table in the modest home marked by the red shield, his hands lightly touching the worn coins and ledgers that lay before him, while his mind quietly absorbed lessons that reached far beyond arithmetic. For within the rhythm of ordinary domestic life, he began to see the intricate dance of human behavior, the subtle balance between trust, caution, and patience that governed relationships both near and far. His father moved deliberately, arranging coins with meticulous care, explaining in calm tones the importance of recording each transaction accurately, not only to preserve value but to maintain credibility, while his mother encouraged Mayer to notice details that often went unnoticed. How a neighbor's hesitation could signal uncertainty, how a friendly smile could indicate reliability, and how every small observation could become part of a larger understanding of the world. A skill that would later allow him to anticipate actions, build networks of trust, and navigate complex social and financial landscapes with precision. Outside, the Judengasse remained alive with quiet activity, the soft shuffle of footsteps on cobblestones, the muted greetings of neighbors, the distant hum of merchants opening stalls. But inside Mayer's young mind, a different kind of commerce was unfolding, one in which relationships, character, and reputation were as valuable as any coin, and each careful observation was a lesson in foresight and judgment, teaching him that patience often brought greater rewards than haste, that discretion was as powerful as action, and that the careful cultivation of knowledge and perception was a treasure that could never be stolen. As he turned over each coin and studied the faint markings on the aged ledgers, Mayer began to grasp that wealth alone did not secure influence, but rather the understanding of people, timing, and subtle social signals, lessons quietly instilled by his parents through consistent example, gentle guidance, and deliberate repetition, creating in him a foundation of discipline, awareness, and quiet confidence that would shape his approach to business and life. The red shield above the doorway, faded by decades of sun and rain, seemed to witness each moment, a silent reminder that even ordinary objects and modest surroundings could hold meaning, that a small home could be a classroom of profound insights, and that the cumulative effect of daily attention, careful observation, and patient learning could produce results far beyond what anyone in the Judengasse could imagine. As the golden afternoon light filled the room, illuminating the worn floorboards, wooden beams, and stacks of ledgers, Mayer felt a sense of purpose growing quietly within him, a recognition that knowledge, patience, and careful attention were tools more valuable than any treasure, and that the habits and insights cultivated in the peaceful rhythm of this home would one day allow him to connect cities, people, and opportunities across Europe, transforming ordinary observations into strategies, relationships into networks, and small coins into instruments of influence, all nurtured under the protective, silent gaze of the red shield, which had quietly observed generations growing, learning, and preparing for futures that reached far beyond the narrow, sunlit streets of Frankfurt, marking the invisible foundation of a legacy that would endure for centuries and shape the course of history itself. As the late afternoon sun cast a warm amber glow across the narrow streets of Frankfurt's Judengasse, the small wooden house, marked by the red shield, hummed with the quiet energy of a home, where lessons far greater than numbers were unfolding. For young Mayer Amschel Rothschild sat at the worn table, his fingers lightly tracing the edges of coins, while his eyes followed the movements of his parents, absorbing not only their words but the subtle gestures, tones, and expressions that carried lessons in patience, discretion, and trust. And though at first glance it seemed like the ordinary rhythm of daily life, the folding of ledgers, the careful stacking of coins, the whispered instructions, and gentle reminders within this seemingly simple routine, Mayer was learning the foundations of a mind that would one day navigate networks of influence across cities and nations, understanding not just the exchange of wealth, but the subtle dynamics of human behavior, reputation, and foresight. Outside, the Judengasse was alive with the muted sounds of commerce and conversation. Merchants arranging goods, neighbors exchanging quiet greetings, the shuffle of carts over cobblestones, all blending into a rhythm that Mayer absorbed with acute awareness, noticing patterns, evaluating trustworthiness, and quietly rehearsing in his mind the careful balancing of opportunity and risk. While inside the home, his father moved deliberately from one task to the next, demonstrating that careful attention to detail, methodical habits, and consistent discipline were as valuable as the coins themselves, and that the smallest error could ripple outward, undermining trust or opportunity. And in these observations, Mayer learned not only mathematics, but strategy, foresight, and the subtle art of human understanding. His mother, quietly encouraging him to notice behaviors and subtleties, taught lessons that could not be found in any book, showing him that perception, patience, and empathy were as important as knowledge or skill, and that the careful cultivation of these qualities, day by day, created an invisible infrastructure that would support great influence and enduring success. And as Mayer absorbed these teachings, he began to understand that true power was not a matter of force or display, but of preparation, subtlety, and the quiet accumulation of insight, skills that, nurtured in the unassuming comfort of a modest home, would later allow him to connect people, opportunities, and resources in ways that few could comprehend. The red shield above the doorway, weathered but steadfast, bore silent witness to this process, a symbol of continuity, patience, and enduring values, marking the place where the careful cultivation of mind, character, and awareness quietly took root. And as sunlight waned, casting long, gentle shadows across the wooden floors and walls, Mayer felt a sense of purpose, curiosity, and understanding growing within him, a recognition that the ordinary routines of observation, counting, and reflection were laying the foundations of something far greater than himself, preparing him to build networks, relationships, and strategies that would span continents and centuries. And that from this small house in the beneath the watchful gaze of a simple red shield, the quiet, methodical, patient work of a young boy was setting the stage for the rise of a dynasty whose influence, nurtured in ordinary moments, would one day be felt across the financial, social, and political world of Europe. A legacy rooted in calm observation, careful thought, and steadfast values that began in the peace and simplicity of home. As the first light of morning spilled across Frankfurt, illuminating the narrow streets of the Judengasse with a soft, golden hue, young Mayer Amschel Rothschild prepared to take his first tentative steps beyond the familiar confines of his family home. The modest wooden house, marked by the faded red shield, standing quietly behind him as both a sanctuary and a reminder of the lessons carefully instilled within its walls. The air was crisp and filled with the muted sounds of early activity merchants opening stalls, carts rolling over cobblestones, neighbors exchanging soft greetings, and the occasional call of a distant bird, while Mayer's mind, alert and observant, traced each interaction with an intensity that belied his years, noting patterns, gestures, and the subtle ways people communicated trust, reliability, and intention, learning to read the invisible language that shaped social and economic life, a skill that would later allow him to anticipate opportunities, assess risks, and navigate the complex networks of influence that spanned cities and nations. Guided by his father's quiet counsel and his mother's gentle encouragement, Mayer began to understand that the world outside his home, while bustling and seemingly chaotic, operated according to discernible rules and rhythms, and that by observing carefully and thinking deliberately, he could find order, meaning, and advantage within it, a realization that infused him with a sense of purpose and quiet excitement. For every merchant's gesture, every neighborly exchange, and every fleeting observation was a lesson in strategy, perception, and human behavior. As he moved along the narrow cobblestone alleyways, his eyes followed the precise movements of merchants arranging goods, the manner in which coins changed hands, and the subtle reactions of customers. Each interaction a miniature drama of trust, negotiation, and timing. And Mayer's young mind recorded each detail with meticulous attention, practicing silently the art of judgment, discretion, and anticipation, skills that would one day allow him to connect people, money, and information across distant cities with remarkable accuracy. The lessons of patience, consistency, and careful observation, cultivated in the quiet hours within the red-shielded home, were now being applied in the wider world, reinforcing the understanding that influence was rarely seized through force or speed, but through careful accumulation of knowledge, relationships, and reputation, and that true success required both the discernment to see opportunity and the restraint to wait for the right moment. Sunlight danced across the wooden beams of surrounding houses, reflecting off the faded red shield as if to silently mark Mayer's passage into a larger world, a world in which every choice carried significance and every observation held the potential to shape outcomes. And in the rhythm of his steps, the young boy internalized the quiet truth that the combination of keen awareness, disciplined practice, and subtle strategy would form the foundation for an extraordinary life. And while to those around him he seemed simply a boy walking through familiar streets, in reality he was quietly laying the groundwork for a career that would one day extend across European capitals, influence kings and ministers, and create a network of financial operations unmatched in scale, all rooted in the calm, measured observations, and patient lessons absorbed in the sunlit rooms of the red-shielded home. And as he paused briefly to watch a merchant exchange coins with a customer, noting the rhythm, trust, and attention to detail in every movement, Mayer felt a sense of quiet confidence, a budding understanding that the ordinary streets of Frankfurt, the first classrooms of a vast and complex world, he was only beginning to navigate, and that each careful step, each observation, and each learned lesson would echo across his life, shaping a legacy far beyond the narrow alleys and wooden homes of the Judengasse. As the morning unfolded over Frankfurt's Judengasse, the soft sunlight bathed the narrow streets in a gentle glow, illuminating the worn cobblestones and the modest wooden houses that lined them, including the small home marked by the faded red shield where young Mayer Amschel Rothschild had grown up, a home that had quietly nurtured his understanding of discipline, observation, and foresight. And as he walked along the bustling alleyways, Mayer's mind absorbed the rhythm and subtleties of life with the quiet intensity of a scholar at study, noting how merchants arranged their goods, how customers hesitated or trusted, how neighbors exchanged subtle signs of agreement or caution. And slowly, through these small but meaningful observations, he began to perceive the invisible structures that governed commerce and social interaction, understanding that timing, discretion, and reputation were as vital as coins and ledgers, and that patient observation could reveal patterns and opportunities that others overlooked, guided by the lessons instilled by his father and mother. Mayer applied the principles of careful attention and delayed action, seeing in each transaction and gesture not only immediate value but potential long-term significance, learning that the most successful decisions were often those made with deliberation rather than haste, and that true advantage came from understanding people and circumstances as much as from possessing material wealth. The sounds of the Judengasse, soft footsteps, distant carts, muted greetings between neighbors, the occasional laugh of children playing in the alleyways blended into a living classroom, offering Mayer countless small scenarios to analyze, interpret, and remember, while inside him the quiet processes of deduction, comparison, and reflection were steadily forming, building an intuition that would allow him to anticipate the actions of others and navigate complex relationships with skill and subtlety. As he paused to watch a merchant skillfully negotiate a sale, noting the careful balance of patience and persuasion, Mayer understood that trust was both fragile and invaluable, that every interaction carried lessons in timing, integrity, and perception, and that the careful cultivation of these qualities, reinforced day by day through repeated observation, could create a foundation of influence far more powerful than immediate gain. And in that realization, he felt a quiet sense of empowerment, recognizing that the habits, patience, and disciplined attention learned in the modest rooms of the red-shielded home were now being tested and strengthened in the larger, busier world outside. Sunlight reflected off the wooden shutters and cobblestones, highlighting the faded red shield above his family home, as if marking the continuity of guidance, the presence of values instilled through years of gentle mentorship and quiet example. And Mayer, moving carefully through the streets, integrated these lessons into every step, every glance, every mental note, cultivating foresight, observation, an understanding that would one day allow him to establish relationships, seize opportunities, and build networks across European cities, shaping a legacy that began humbly in the Judengasse, but would grow to touch the financial, social, and political life of nations, demonstrating that the patient accumulation of knowledge, discretion, and careful observation could transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. And as he paused briefly to reflect, the young boy understood that every lesson, every gesture, every silent observation from this morning would ripple forward through time, shaping a future defined not only by wealth but by insight, judgment, and the careful, deliberate cultivation of influence. As the day moved into early afternoon, the soft sunlight of Frankfurt's Judengasse highlighted the textures of the narrow cobblestone streets and the worn, wooden houses that had stood for generations, including the small home marked by the faded red shield, where young Mayer Amschel Rothschild had spent countless hours learning the quiet lessons of patience, precision, and foresight. And now, as he stepped into the livelier streets, his mind was alert to the subtle rhythms and gestures that governed everyday life, noticing the careful placement of goods by merchants, the pauses in conversation between neighbors, and the nuanced expressions that conveyed trust or hesitation. And in each observation, he saw not just a fleeting moment, but a window into patterns, strategies, and the unseen mechanisms by which people and commerce interacted. With each step, Mayer absorbed these lessons as if they were tangible objects, translating the ordinary actions of his surroundings into mental maps of opportunity, reliability, and timing, all while maintaining the quiet composure and attentiveness that had been cultivated in the modest home with the red shield, a composure that allowed him to perceive things others overlooked and to store these insights for future use, gradually building a framework of understanding that combined human behavior, risk assessment, and strategic patience. Inside his mind, every gesture, every exchange, and every nuance of tone or expression became part of a growing repository of knowledge, an invisible ledger of human interaction. And as he observed a merchant skillfully balancing persuasion and honesty in a transaction, Mayer recognized the power of discretion, the necessity of trust, and the delicate interplay between patience and action, realizing that these principles were as valuable as the coins and ledgers he had studied at home, and that the careful observation and timing of decisions could determine outcomes far more than mere possession of wealth. The red shield above his family home, visible through gaps between the houses, seemed to mark a constant point of reference, a symbol of guidance and continuity, reminding him that the values instilled through patient instruction and quiet modeling discipline, attentiveness, prudence, and integrity, were the true instruments of lasting influence, and that applying them consistently, even in small daily interactions, laid the groundwork for a network of relationships and opportunities that could extend far beyond the narrow streets of Frankfurt. As he continued walking, Mayer mentally cataloged behaviors, reactions, and choices, silently practicing discernment, judgment, and anticipation, noticing how subtle gestures signaled confidence, hesitation, or honesty, and recognizing that each person's response could reveal information about their character, intentions, and potential as an ally or partner. a skill that would later allow him to navigate the complex world of European finance and diplomacy with remarkable accuracy. The afternoon light softened, casting gentle shadows across the buildings and the cobblestones, while Mayer, moving through this environment with calm awareness, felt the growing certainty that understanding people, their motivations, reactions, and behaviors was as crucial as understanding numbers, and that by observing attentively, thinking patiently, and connecting seemingly small details, he could transform ordinary moments into extraordinary insight. And in this realization, the foundations of his future influence and the quiet shaping of the Rothschild legacy were being laid, all beginning in the peaceful, attentive, and sunlit streets of Frankfurt, where the red-shielded home and its lessons remained a constant anchor for a mind learning the subtle art of observation, strategy, and foresight. As the afternoon sun stretched across the narrow cobblestone streets of Frankfurt's Judengasse, casting warm golden light on the worn wooden houses and the modest home marked by the faded red shield, young Mayer Amschel Rothschild continued to explore the subtle currents of life around him, his eyes and mind attuned to the quiet lessons hidden in ordinary interactions. For every gesture, pause, and exchange offered insight into trust, patience, and human behavior. And Mayer had begun to realize that understanding these nuances was as valuable as counting coins or balancing ledgers. He watched closely as merchants negotiated with careful deliberation, noting how pauses, eye contact, and subtle gestures signaled confidence, uncertainty, or credibility. And he compared these behaviors to the lessons his father had quietly imparted at home, recognizing that reputation, discretion, and timing were as powerful as any material asset, and often more enduring. For wealth without understanding of human nature and timing could be fleeting, while knowledge of people and careful judgment could create influence that spanned cities and generations. Inside the small house, the red shield above the doorway remained a silent witness to these formative experiences, symbolizing continuity, guidance, and the enduring values passed down through patient instruction and subtle example. And as Mayer moved through the bustling streets, he carried with him the quiet confidence that these principles could be applied beyond the familiar walls of his home, guiding his observations and shaping his decisions. And he began to practice applying them with each interaction, noting who acted with honesty, who hesitated, and how a single choice or gesture could affect trust and perception, reinforcing the importance of careful consideration and measured responses. The Judengasse was alive with the soft rhythms of daily life, the calls of merchants arranging their goods, but Mayer's focus transformed ordinary sights and sounds into lessons of strategy, patience, and insight as he slowly built an internal map of behavior, opportunity, and influence, recognizing that understanding the timing of actions and the subtle cues of human expression allowed one to anticipate outcomes, maintain trust, and create advantageous relationships. A realization that would later form the core of his approach to business and networking. As the sunlight softened and shadows lengthened across the streets, Mayer paused briefly to observe a small exchange between neighbors, noting how politeness, restraint, and careful observation governed interactions as much as any formal rules. And he internalized the lesson that influence was rarely imposed was cultivated quietly, patiently, and consistently through understanding, attention, and trust, skills that required discipline and care to develop, and which, once mastered, could ripple outward to shape entire networks and communities. Every coin he had examined, every ledger he had balanced, every subtle gesture he had noted in the streets of the Judengässe, now combined into a tapestry of knowledge and foresight, teaching him that power and success were built not on speed or force, but on careful observation, patient strategy, and the cultivation of trust. And in this calm realization, the foundations of the Rothschild legacy were being further strengthened, planted firmly in the quiet afternoons of Frankfurt, beneath the watchful red shield that silently marked a place where a boy was learning the timeless lessons of trust, timing, and foresight that would one day extend across nations and generations. As the golden light of late afternoon settled over Frankfurt's Judengässe, casting long, gentle shadows across the narrow cobblestone streets and illuminating the modest wooden houses, including the familiar home marked by the faded red shield, young Mayer Amschel Rothschild walked slowly, observing each detail with quiet attention, for he had begun to understand that the ordinary rhythm of life held extraordinary lessons, and that careful observation, patience, and discernment were as valuable as the coins and ledgers he studied at home, and often more so, for they revealed the subtle forces shaping human behavior, relationships, and opportunity. He watched a merchant skillfully negotiate with a customer, noting the measured tone, the deliberate pause, and the careful gesture, and recognized that trust, timing, and subtle influence were the true currencies of the world. Lessons that had been gently instilled within him by his father and mother through daily guidance, quiet example, and repeated observation, forming an invisible framework of understanding that would later guide him in complex negotiations and strategic decisions across cities and nations. The red shield above his family home, faded but steadfast, seemed to watch over him as a silent reminder that the principles of patience, discipline, and careful observation were the foundations of enduring influence. And as he continued through the Judengässe, Mayer mentally cataloged behaviors, choices, and subtle interactions, slowly building an internal map of trust, risk, opportunity, and timing, understanding that every gesture, word, and action could have consequences far beyond what was immediately visible, and that foresight, careful judgment, and measured action were far more powerful than immediate impulse or display of wealth. The streets were alive with quiet activity, the shuffle of feet, the soft murmur of conversation, the distant clatter of carts. But Mayer's mind transformed these ordinary moments into lessons of strategy, perception, and human insight, seeing patterns, anticipating outcomes, and quietly rehearsing the careful decisions that would one day allow him to connect people, information, and resources across Europe. He recalled the lessons from his parents at the red-shielded home. Every coin counted, every record maintained with precision, every interaction handled with attention and integrity. And all of these seemingly small actions contributed to a broader understanding of patience, trust, and influence, which would become the bedrock of the Rothschild legacy. As the sun dipped lower, casting a warm amber hue across the street and the red-shielded house, Mayer paused briefly to observe a small exchange between neighbors, noting how respect, attentiveness, and subtle timing determined outcomes. And in this quiet observation, he felt a growing sense of purpose and understanding, recognizing that the foundation of power and influence lay not in wealth alone, but in the careful cultivation of knowledge, perception, and human connections. Each ordinary detail, each gentle observation, and each thoughtful reflection from this afternoon, as mundane as it may have seemed to anyone else, were in fact the seeds of a future empire, planted patiently in the peaceful streets of the Judangasa and nurtured within the walls of a modest home, under the silent yet enduring gaze of the Red Shield. A home where a young boy was learning the timeless lessons of foresight, strategy, patience, and trust that would one day define the Rothschild family's remarkable legacy across generations and nations. As the first rays of morning spread over the rooftops of Frankfurt, casting a soft glow on the cobblestone streets of the Judengasse, young Mayer Amschel Rothschild prepared to step beyond the familiar walls of his home. The modest wooden house, marked by the faded red shield standing silently behind him as a reminder of the lessons carefully instilled within its walls. A place where patience, observation, and discipline had been nurtured with gentle guidance and quiet consistency. The streets were beginning to stir with muted activity, the soft calls of merchants, the gentle clatter of carts over cobblestones, neighbors exchanging greetings in low tones, and children running and laughing in the alleyways. But Mayer moved with a quiet focus, observing the subtle interactions around him, noting the rhythm of the streets, the gestures of trust, the delicate interplay of human behavior, and the small but significant choices that governed daily life. For he understood that the ordinary patterns of the Judangasa were in fact lessons in strategy, perception, and understanding, providing a living classroom where the skills of foresight, judgment, and attention could be cultivated alongside arithmetic and record-keeping. Each interaction, each subtle glance or pause, became a thread in the intricate tapestry of human networks, teaching Mayer that influence and opportunity were not seized by force or speed alone, but by careful observation, patience, and the ability to anticipate actions and reactions, principles that his father and mother had instilled through the quiet repetition of daily routines, the meticulous care of coins and ledgers, and the gentle instruction that every small detail mattered. As he walked further from the red-shielded home, he noted the ways merchants gauged their customers' trust, how neighbors' eyes and gestures revealed intentions, and how the timing of words and actions could determine outcomes. Absorbing these lessons with the calm intensity of a mind training itself in the subtle art of human understanding, a skill that would later allow him to navigate the complex webs of European commerce and diplomacy with precision and foresight. Sunlight reflected softly off the weathered wooden shutters of surrounding houses, highlighting the red shield as a silent emblem of continuity, a reminder that the values cultivated within the home discipline, integrity, attentiveness, and patience were the true instruments of influence, and that by carrying these principles into the wider world, Mayer could transform ordinary moments into opportunities, connecting people, knowledge, and resources in ways that would eventually shape the foundation of a financial empire. Every coin he had handled, every ledger he had balanced, every subtle observation made in the streets of Frankfurt, combined into a growing understanding that wealth alone was insufficient, that foresight, strategic thinking, and careful cultivation of trust were the true assets of power. And in the warm glow of the morning, Mayer felt the quiet thrill of discovery, a sense that the ordinary streets, simple homes, and daily rhythms of his early life were in fact the classrooms where he had learned the seeds of patience, perception, and subtle influence. Lessons that would one day allow him to extend his family's name far beyond the narrow alleys of the Judangasa and leave a legacy that touched cities, nations, and generations yet to come. As the morning deepened, the soft light of Frankfurt's Judangasa illuminated the narrow cobblestone streets and the worn wooden houses, including the familiar red-shielded home that had quietly nurtured Mayer Amschel Rothschild's earliest lessons in patience, observation, and careful calculation. And as he continued his walk through the gently bustling alleys, Mayer's eyes and mind absorbed every detail with meticulous attention. For he had begun to understand that every encounter, every subtle gesture, and every minor transaction held lessons far beyond their immediate appearance, teaching him about trust, timing, and the invisible structures that governed human behavior and commerce. Lessons that would become indispensable in his later years as he expanded his family's influence across cities and nations. He watched a merchant arranging his wares, noting the careful placement of coins, the subtle communication with customers, and the way the merchant's patience and timing influenced perceptions of reliability and fairness. And Mayer silently reflected on how these same principles had been demonstrated within his home, where his father meticulously balanced ledgers and counted coins, instilling a respect for accuracy, consistency, and integrity, while his mother gently guided him to notice the subtleties of character, the signals of hesitation or trust, and the ways people conveyed intentions without words, building a foundation of insight that would allow him to navigate complex social and financial networks with precision and foresight. The Judangasa itself seemed alive with lessons: the shuffle of feet on cobblestones, the quiet conversations between neighbors, the soft calls of vendors starting their trade, all offering opportunities for Mayer to practice observation, interpretation, and anticipation, turning ordinary interactions into a rich source of strategic knowledge, while inside him mental maps of character, behavior, and opportunity quietly formed, allowing him to recognize patterns, anticipate outcomes, and understand the ways trust, timing, and subtle influence governed success in commerce and life. As he paused to watch a small transaction between a customer and a merchant, noting the pauses, gestures, and tone, Mayer realized that influence was cultivated through consistency, patience, and the careful attention to detail, rather than through force or show, and that each small observation and reflection added to an invisible reservoir of knowledge, insight, and strategy that would one day allow him to build networks across European cities, connect people and resources effectively, and create a legacy of enduring influence. Sunlight reflected gently off the weathered wooden shutters and the faded red shield, symbolizing continuity, stability, and the enduring values instilled within him from childhood. While Mayer's growing understanding of trust, timing, and subtle human behavior reinforced the quiet confidence that he was preparing himself for challenges far beyond the familiar streets of the Judangasa. and that the cumulative lessons of observation, reflection, and patience would form the scaffolding of both his personal success and the lasting legacy of the Rothschild family, teaching him that the ordinary moments of daily life, carefully noticed and thoughtfully interpreted, could contain the seeds of extraordinary achievement, insight, and influence, lessons that would quietly ripple outward, shaping decisions, networks, and opportunities for decades to come. As the afternoon sunlight began to warm the narrow cobblestone streets of Frankfurt's Judengasse, young Mayer Amschel Rothschild moved with quiet focus, absorbing every subtle detail of the life unfolding around him. For he had begun to understand that the ordinary interactions, gestures, and exchanges of daily life held lessons far beyond their immediate appearance, and that careful observation, patience, and reflection were as valuable as any coin or ledger. He noticed how merchants arranged their goods, the way customers hesitated or acted with confidence, the small cues in tone, expression, and posture that revealed trustworthiness or caution. And he compared these moments to the careful guidance of his parents at the red-shielded home, where his father's precise handling of coins and meticulous maintenance of ledgers had taught him the importance of accuracy, discipline, and consistency, while his mother's quiet encouragement to notice subtle gestures and expressions had instilled in him the understanding that human behavior, perception, and trust were the invisible currencies of life. Each step Mayer took through the Judengasse became an opportunity to practice discerning patterns, anticipating outcomes, and building a mental framework of human networks, understanding that influence and opportunity were cultivated through careful observation, thoughtful judgment, and patient action, rather than through force, speed, or display of wealth. As he paused briefly to watch a small transaction between a merchant and a customer, noting the careful timing, the subtle gestures, and the interplay of patience and persuasion, Mayer realized that these everyday interactions mirrored the larger principles that governed finance, relationships, and reputation, and that by internalizing such lessons now, he was quietly preparing himself for challenges far beyond the narrow streets of his neighborhood. Sunlight reflected softly on the faded red shield above his family home, a symbol of continuity, guidance, and enduring values, reminding him that the principles cultivated through careful mentorship, repetition, and attention to detail, observation, integrity, and strategic thought were more valuable than any immediate gain, forming a foundation for enduring influence and long-term success. As the streets hummed with the quiet rhythms of commerce and conversation, Mayer's mind cataloged behaviors, subtle cues, and social dynamics, building an invisible map of trust, timing, opportunity, and character, all while reinforcing the understanding that the most significant power lay not in coins alone, but in the careful cultivation of insight, perception, and human connection. Every observation, reflection, and patient calculation became part of a growing reservoir of knowledge, a silent accumulation of strategy and foresight that would later allow him to navigate the complex world of European finance, build networks across cities, and influence both people and outcomes with remarkable precision. And in the golden afternoon light, as shadows stretched across the cobblestones and the red-shielded home stood quietly in the background, Mayer felt the profound understanding that the ordinary, carefully observed moments of daily life were, in fact, the building blocks of extraordinary achievement, shaping both his personal growth and the future legacy of the Rothschild family in ways that would ripple across generations and continents, demonstrating that insight, patience, and subtle understanding were the true currencies of influence. As the late afternoon sun bathed the narrow streets of Frankfurt's Judengasse in a warm amber glow, young Mayer Amschel Rothschild walked with a calm awareness, his eyes and mind absorbing every detail of the life around him. For he had come to understand that ordinary daily interactions were rich with lessons about trust, timing, and the subtle dynamics of human behavior, lessons that could not be learned from coins or ledgers alone, but from careful observation, reflection, and patient attention. He noticed the merchants negotiating with quiet skill, the slight pauses that signaled hesitation or confidence, the measured gestures that conveyed reliability. And he compared these patterns to the disciplined routines he had observed in his home, marked by the faded red shield, where his father's meticulous handling of accounts and his mother's gentle encouragement to notice the smallest details had instilled a deep understanding that integrity, patience, and perception were as valuable as gold, forming the foundation for influence, foresight, and long-term success. The Judengasse itself seemed alive with quiet instruction, the soft shuffle of feet, muted conversations, distant carts, and the gentle murmur of neighbors, all offering a subtle classroom in which Mayer practiced reading behavior, interpreting signals, and internalizing lessons about trust, timing, and discretion, all of which would become the pillars of his later endeavors across European finance. As he paused to watch a merchant carefully balancing persuasion and honesty in a transaction, Mayer realized that influence was cultivated slowly and deliberately, that trust had to be earned, timing had to be respected, and that small observations could have far-reaching consequences, shaping relationships, opportunities, and outcomes. Sunlight reflected gently off the weathered shutters and the faded red shield above his home, symbolizing continuity and the enduring values of careful cultivation, integrity, and disciplined attention to detail. And Mayer, walking through the streets, carried these lessons in his mind, translating ordinary interactions into strategies of foresight, patience, and understanding, quietly rehearsing the skills that would allow him to connect people, money, and knowledge across cities and nations, creating a network of trust and influence that would endure for generations. Every glance, every gesture, every carefully noted action became part of an invisible ledger of insight, building a quiet confidence in Mayer that the combination of observation, analysis, and patient action was the true currency of power, and that wealth alone, without understanding people and timing, could not achieve the same lasting influence. And as the amber sunlight deepened across the cobblestones, Mayer felt a profound sense of purpose and clarity, recognizing that the ordinary streets of the Judengasse, the quiet home with the red shield, and the lessons carefully taught by his parents were all part of the foundation of a legacy that would one day reach across Europe, demonstrating that insight, patience, and careful observation were as powerful as any coin and often far more enduring, planting the seeds of the Rothschild family's remarkable influence for centuries to come. As the evening sun began to cast long, golden shadows across the narrow cobblestone streets of Frankfurt's Judengasse, young Mayer Amschel Rothschild walked slowly, his eyes absorbing every detail of the bustling streets and quiet corners. Understanding that the ordinary rhythm of life contained lessons far greater than any coin, ledger, or account could teach, and that careful observation, patience, and discernment were the true foundations of knowledge, influence, and future success. He watched merchants negotiating with subtle gestures, neighbors exchanging soft greetings, and the careful timing of exchanges that revealed trust, hesitation, or confidence. And he compared these moments to the disciplined routines and careful guidance he had received within the modest home marked by the faded red shield, where his father meticulously managed coins and ledgers, and his mother encouraged him to notice the smallest signals of human behavior, teaching him that integrity, attention, and careful judgment were far more valuable than immediate gain. Each interaction on the street became a lesson in strategy, perception, and the quiet cultivation of influence. And Mayer internalized these lessons, slowly building an invisible mental map of human networks, opportunities, and timing, understanding that the accumulation of trust, the careful observation of character, and the patient application of knowledge were the true currencies that would allow him to navigate the complex world beyond his familiar neighborhood. As he paused to watch a small transaction between a merchant and a customer, noting the subtle pauses, gestures, and expressions that guided the flow of trust and decision-making, Mayer realized that influence could only be cultivated through consistency, insight, and thoughtful action, and that the skills of observation, anticipation, and discretion, quietly practiced in the streets and reinforced by the lessons of his home, would become the invisible scaffolding for the future Rothschild legacy. The red shield above his house, faded but steadfast, served as a reminder of continuity, of values patiently instilled and practiced, of the enduring importance of patience, integrity, and attentiveness. And Mayer, moving with calm awareness, carried these principles with him as he walked through the Judengasse, translating ordinary observations into lasting lessons, understanding the subtle interplay of trust, timing, and human behavior, and imagining the networks, opportunities, and alliances that would one day extend far beyond Frankfurt. The gentle evening light highlighted the textures of wooden shutters, cobblestones, and merchant stalls, reflecting the quiet dignity of everyday life, while Mayer's mind catalogued patterns, behaviors, and strategies, rehearsing foresight, judgment, and measured decision-making that would later guide him in business and relationships across Europe. And in this calm, contemplative walk through streets he had known since childhood, Mayer felt a growing sense of readiness, a quiet confidence that the lessons learned within the home with the red shield, and the subtle observations of daily life had prepared him to step into a larger world, to build connections, seize opportunities, and apply insight with patience and precision, laying the foundation for a legacy that would endure for generations, demonstrating that the quiet cultivation of understanding, trust, and strategy in ordinary moments could grow into extraordinary influence, shaping not only his own future, but that of the Rothschild family for centuries to come. As the first light of morning stretched across the rooftops of Frankfurt, gently illuminating the narrow cobblestone streets of the Judengasse. Young Mayer Amschel Rothschild felt a quiet anticipation, for today marked another step beyond the familiar confines of his home. The small wooden house with the faded red shield standing silently behind him as a symbol of the lessons and values carefully nurtured within its walls. A place where patience, observation, and discipline had been instilled through the steady guidance of his parents. The streets themselves were beginning to stir with muted activity, the soft shuffle of footsteps, the distant calls of merchants arranging their goods, neighbors exchanging gentle greetings, and children running lightly in the alleys. But Mayer moved with deliberate calm, his eyes and mind absorbing every nuance, noting gestures, pauses, and subtle interactions. For he had learned that even the smallest actions could carry meaning and provide insight into human character, trustworthiness, and opportunity, lessons that could not be gleaned from coins or ledgers alone, but only through attentive observation and reflection. As he walked past familiar shops and stalls, he watched merchants carefully arranging their wares, customers hesitating or acting with confidence, and neighbors exchanging quiet signals of agreement or caution. And he translated these ordinary interactions into lessons of patience, foresight, and understanding, mentally cataloging behaviors, gestures, and timing, understanding that influence and opportunity were rarely achieved through haste or display, but rather through careful attention, strategic observation, and measured action. The red shield above his home, though faded by years of sun and rain, seemed to mark a point of constancy and guidance, reminding Mayer that the principles learned within its walls, discipline, integrity, attentiveness, and patience, were the invisible instruments of influence, forming a foundation that could carry him far beyond the Judengasse, connecting people, resources, and information across cities and eventually across nations. Each step became a lesson in perception, anticipation, and strategic thinking, as Mayer noticed the small details that others overlooked, a pause that signaled hesitation, a subtle smile indicating trust, a gesture conveying confidence. And he understood that these signals, carefully interpreted, could guide decisions, shape relationships, and reveal opportunities that were invisible to those who only looked at the surface. Sunlight reflected softly on the cobblestones and the wooden shutters of surrounding houses, highlighting the red shield as a symbol of continuity and enduring values. And Mayer felt a quiet thrill of discovery, recognizing that the ordinary streets, the daily rhythms, and the careful lessons imparted by his parents were, in fact, the classrooms of a future empire, preparing him to navigate challenges far beyond Frankfurt, cultivate relationships across Europe, and transform ordinary observations into strategies, networks, and influence, quietly laying the groundwork for the Rothschild legacy that would endure across generations, founded on insight, patience, trust, and the subtle art of understanding people and timing. And in the soft glow of the morning, Mayer took each measured step with calm confidence, knowing that the foundations of success were being built in the ordinary, carefully observed moments of everyday life. As the morning unfolded over Frankfurt's Judengasse, young Mayer Amschel Rothschild moved through the narrow cobblestone streets with a calm, deliberate focus, observing the rhythms of everyday life with an intensity that belied his years. For he had learned that the smallest gestures, pauses, and expressions could reveal patterns, intentions, and opportunities far beyond what was immediately visible, and that careful attention to these subtleties was as valuable as any coin or ledger in understanding the world. He watched merchants arranging their wares, noting the careful timing and positioning that influenced customers' perceptions, how small gestures conveyed honesty or hesitation, and how brief interactions between neighbors communicated trust or caution, translating each observation into lessons about human behavior, foresight, and subtle influence. While recalling the guidance instilled in him at the modest home marked by the faded red shield, where his father had taught him the precision of numbers and ledgers, and his mother had quietly encouraged him to notice the nuanced signs of character, patience, and judgment in every human interaction, forming a foundation of insight that would one day guide him across complex networks of finance and social connections. The Judangasa itself seemed like a living classroom, alive with lessons in timing, strategy, and perception. From the soft shuffle of feet over cobblestones, the gentle exchange of greetings between neighbors, to the delicate balancing acts of merchants negotiating sales, each scenario offering an opportunity to practice observation, interpretation, and the application of patience, discretion, and judgment, all while internalizing the understanding that influence and success were rarely gained through haste or force, but through consistent attention, careful analysis, and thoughtful decision-making. Mayer paused briefly to observe a subtle exchange between a merchant and a customer, noting the pauses, gestures, and intonation that guided the interaction, realizing that these small moments mirrored the larger principles of commerce, negotiation, and human relations, and that the disciplined observation and reflective thinking he practiced in the streets were quietly building the scaffolding for the Rothschild legacy, a framework of knowledge, foresight, and connection that would extend far beyond Frankfurt. Sunlight reflected softly off the wooden shutters and the red-shielded home behind him, symbolizing stability, continuity, and the enduring values of patience, integrity, and attentiveness, while Mayer's mind cataloged behavior, timing, and trust, rehearsing the subtle skills that would allow him to connect people, money, and opportunity across cities, building influence and networks through careful, measured action. Every ordinary moment, carefully noticed and thoughtfully interpreted, became part of an invisible repository of insight and strategy, teaching Mayer that power, influence, and lasting success were rooted in observation, understanding, and patient cultivation of trust. And as the soft morning light filled the streets, he felt a quiet sense of readiness, knowing that these lessons, drawn from the simple rhythms of everyday life and the careful guidance of his parents, were shaping him into a young man prepared to navigate a wider world, laying the foundations for the extraordinary legacy of the Rothschild family across generations and nations. As the afternoon sun climbed higher over Frankfurt, casting warm light across the narrow cobblestone streets of the Judangasa, young Mayer Amschel Rothschild walked with deliberate calm, observing every detail of the life unfolding around him, understanding that the ordinary moments of daily activity were rich with lessons in human behavior, strategy, and foresight, and that the careful study of gestures, pauses, and exchanges could reveal patterns of trust, opportunity, and timing that coins or ledgers alone could never convey. He noticed merchants arranging their goods with precision, customers hesitating or acting confidently, and neighbors signaling agreement or caution through subtle glances and gestures. And he translated each observation into practical lessons about strategy, discretion, and influence, while recalling the early guidance received within the modest home marked by the faded red shield, where his father had meticulously handled coins and maintained ledgers, demonstrating the importance of accuracy, patience, and consistency. And his mother had quietly nurtured his awareness of human nature, encouraging him to notice expressions, tones, and body language, teaching that insight into people was as vital as understanding numbers. The Judangasa itself, alive with quiet activity, the shuffle of feet, muted conversations, distant calls of vendors became a living classroom. Each ordinary exchange a subtle lesson in the cultivation of trust, the application of timing, and the interpretation of character. And Mayer internalized these moments, building an invisible mental map of behaviors, motivations, and opportunities that would guide his decisions and actions in the wider world. Pausing to watch a merchant negotiate a careful transaction, noting the measured gestures, pauses, and attention to detail, Mayer realized that influence and opportunity were cultivated through patient observation, strategic thinking, and thoughtful action, not through force, display, or speed, and that the skills he practiced quietly in the Judangasa would later allow him to connect people, resources, and information across cities, establishing networks of trust and influence that could endure for generations. The red shield above his family home, bathed in soft sunlight, stood as a symbol of continuity, guidance, and the enduring values of integrity, attentiveness, and patience, reminding Mayer that the principles instilled within its walls were the instruments that would transform ordinary knowledge into strategic advantage. While every observation in the streets reinforced the understanding that the careful cultivation of insight, judgment, and foresight was more valuable than immediate gains, shaping the foundation of both personal and family success. As the afternoon light deepened, shadows stretching across the cobblestones and wooden shutters, Mayer felt a quiet confidence that the accumulation of patient observation, reflection, and disciplined thinking was steadily preparing him to step into a wider world, to seize opportunities with careful precision, and to establish a legacy built on knowledge, strategy, and understanding of human nature, lessons that would quietly ripple through time to form the bedrock of the Rothschild family's enduring influence, showing that the careful attention to ordinary moments and subtle details was the true preparation for extraordinary achievement, and that foresight, patience, and insight were the currencies of lasting success. As the late afternoon sun bathed the narrow streets of Frankfurt's Judangasa in a warm amber glow, young Mayer Amschel Rothschild walked deliberately, his mind attuned to the subtle rhythms of daily life around him, understanding that every gesture, pause, and interaction carried lessons in trust, timing, and the dynamics of human behavior that coins or ledgers alone could never teach. He observed merchants carefully balancing persuasion and honesty, noting the pauses, glances, and small gestures that signaled confidence, hesitation, or trust. and he mentally cataloged these behaviors, translating ordinary moments into lessons in strategy, foresight, and influence. While recalling the patient guidance of his parents within the modest home marked by the faded red shield, where his father's meticulous handling of accounts and coins had taught him precision and discipline, and his mother's gentle encouragement to notice subtle expressions and cues had instilled the understanding that insight into character, timing, and perception was the true currency of lasting success. The Judengasse itself seemed alive with instruction. Every soft shuffle of feet, muted conversation, and distant merchant call offering practical exercises in observation, anticipation, and reflection, and Mayer absorbed each detail with quiet intensity, building an invisible framework of understanding that would allow him to navigate complex social and financial networks with precision and foresight, recognizing that careful attention, patience, and consistent analysis were far more powerful than force, haste, or display of wealth. Pausing to watch a small transaction, Mayer noted how a slight hesitation, a subtle nod, or a careful smile could shift trust and influence outcomes. Realizing that the lessons practiced here in the ordinary streets of his neighborhood were microcosms of the larger strategies he would later employ in finance and diplomacy across European cities, allowing him to connect people, knowledge, and resources effectively. The red shield above his family home, highlighted by the warm amber sunlight, symbolized continuity, stability, and the enduring values of integrity, patience, and attentiveness, reminding Mayer that the principles nurtured within its walls, careful observation, disciplined thought, and subtle understanding of human behavior, were the tools that would transform ordinary insight into strategic advantage, while each passing moment on the streets reinforced that influence was cultivated quietly, patiently, and deliberately, rather than seized impulsively. As shadows lengthened and the amber light deepened, Mayer's mind cataloged subtle patterns of behavior, timing, and opportunity, practicing foresight, judgment, and the patient orchestration of actions, understanding that ordinary life held the blueprint of extraordinary achievement, and that by connecting the lessons of home and street with careful reflection and disciplined practice, he was steadily preparing to step beyond the Judengasse, extend his influence across cities, and lay the foundation of a legacy that would endure for generations, demonstrating that careful observation, insight, and strategic patience were the hidden currencies of lasting power, and that every ordinary detail of daily life, thoughtfully noticed and interpreted, contributed to the growth of both personal skill and the enduring Rothschild family influence. As the evening sun casts long golden shadows across the narrow cobblestone streets of Frankfurt's Judengasse, young Mayer Amschel Rothschild walked with deliberate calm, his mind fully engaged in the subtle lessons offered by the ordinary rhythms of life around him, understanding that trust, timing, and the careful reading of human behavior were the hidden currencies of success, lessons that could not be learned from coins or ledgers alone, but only through patient observation, reflection, and experience. He noticed merchants skillfully balancing persuasion and honesty, the soft hesitation of customers, and the quiet gestures of neighbors signaling agreement, caution, or trust, and he mentally cataloged these moments, turning them into enduring lessons in foresight, strategy, and influence. while recalling the steady guidance of his parents within the modest home marked by the faded red shield, where his father's meticulous management of accounts had instilled precision and discipline, and his mother's quiet encouragement to observe subtle expressions, tone, and posture had taught him the importance of perception, patience, and insight into human nature. Each street, stall, and doorway of the Judangasa seemed alive with instruction. The shuffle of feet, distant conversations, and muted calls of merchants offering practical exercises in observation, anticipation, and discernment. And Mayer absorbed these details with calm intensity, gradually building an invisible framework of knowledge that would allow him to navigate complex networks of finance, diplomacy, and social connection with remarkable precision and foresight. Pausing to watch a merchant complete a careful transaction, Mayer recognized how timing, subtle gestures, and consistent attention shaped trust and guided outcomes, understanding that these seemingly small lessons reflected the larger principles he would later employ to connect people, resources, and information across Europe, and that patient cultivation of insight and understanding would become the foundation of his family's enduring influence. The faded red shield above his home glowed softly in the evening light, a silent emblem of continuity, stability, and the values of patience, integrity, and attentiveness, reminding Mayer that the principles nurtured within its walls careful observation, disciplined thought, and insight into human behavior were the tools that would transform ordinary experience into strategic advantage, while the ordinary moments of daily life provided the blueprint for extraordinary achievement, showing that influence and success were cultivated through quiet attention, reflection, and deliberate action rather than haste or force. As the shadows lengthened and the amber light deepened, Mayer's mind cataloged patterns of behavior, subtle cues of timing and trust, and the interplay of human decisions, rehearsing foresight, judgment, and measured action, understanding that these skills would allow him to step beyond the Judengat, extend his influence across cities and nations, and establish a legacy of enduring significance. In this calm, contemplative walk through familiar streets, Mayer felt a quiet confidence that the foundations laid in the home with the red shield, reinforced by careful observation and patient reflection in everyday life, had prepared him to cultivate relationships, seize opportunities with strategic insight, and quietly build a network of trust, knowledge, and influence that would carry the Rothschild family into a future of extraordinary accomplishment, demonstrating that insight, patience, and subtle understanding were the true instruments of power, and that every ordinary moment, thoughtfully observed and interpreted,